Hi everyone. Recently I've been researching a psychoactive herb called Salvia Divinorum. It's something that's always really fascinated me, but I've never really gone out my way to buy any or to do any in-depth research on it. However, over the last few months I've felt more and more drawn to finding out what exactly Salvia is all about. For anyone that doesn't know what Salvia is, I'll give you a quick rundown on it. Basically, it's a psychoactive herb from the mint family. It's been used for many centuries by Mazatec shamans in southern Mexico to induce dreamlike trances which can help them in their spiritual healing sessions. The herb is usually smoked in a pipe or a bong, or it can be chewed as well, although it is more common to smoke it. If smoked, the effects of the herb come on within about 30 seconds, 40 seconds, and you peak on it for about 2 or 3 minutes. It's a very short-lived effect. If you chew it, the effects will last longer, but they won't be quite as intense. Regardless of however short-lived the experience on Salvia is, it's still believed to be the strongest natural hallucinogenic known to man. For anyone that's watched my beating addiction videos in the past, I can't stress enough how this ain't me getting back into old habits, and I'm purely experimenting with this herb for spiritual exploration and self-discovery. And I haven't just jumped into this blindly. I'm giving it very, very careful consideration, and I've done a lot of research about it. And what has my research yielded, you may ask? Well, currently, as a society, this is what we know about the herb. It has no long-term side effects, and it has no potential of becoming addictive. None at all. Again, like I said, this is what we're currently aware of, and yeah, this may change in 10 years. They might stumble across something and that changes. But you can only go on what you know at this moment in time. I can't read the future. Well, I can sometimes actually, but not on demand. So you've got to go on what you know presently. And presently, they can't find anything about this herb that is destructive in any sort of way possible. In fact, the complete and utter opposite. What they found so far is this, I don't even like to call it a drug. I went to call it a drug then, but it's not a drug. I just want to reiterate this. This is a magical herb. Shamans, Mazatec shamans have been using this for centuries. This isn't like ecstasy or skunk or whatever. This is something beautiful, and that's got to be respected. So yeah, anyway, I lost my train of thought there. What was I saying? Yeah. This herb, if anything, looks like it could have positive effects on the human brain. The research they've done so far, it looks like it could actually help with clinical depression and things like bipolar disorder. So with all this in mind, I decided to purchase some. And I did the other day on Saturday, 16th of February I think it was. Purchased 1 gram of Salvia extract of the 10x variety. So far I've tried it 4 different times, and 2 out of the 4 times have actually been really, really moving spiritual experiences. And that's obviously just what I was looking for, so I was really, really pleased. Now what I'd like to do is actually tell you about the best one out of the 4. I've written it down on the screen because it is quite a strange experience, so it's one I want to make sure I've told you it all perfectly. So yeah, I'm going to look away from you now and read off the screen. Okay, here we go. The experience I'm about to describe happened on the evening of February 18th, 2008, and was the 4th time I'd ever smoked the herb. Beforehand, I gathered my thoughts and asked the herb that my experience be profound and insightful, and that when I returned from wherever it decided to bring me, that I remembered in detail exactly what had happened. So I proceeded to pack my pipe with some salvia and took a nice long drag on it before laying back down on my bed. When taking salvia, it is suggested that you hold the hit in for as long as you possibly can, so I did exactly that. Within about half a minute of me holding it in, I suddenly felt as if I were falling through my bed and being sucked entirely out of my room and into what I'm now terming as the behind the scenes section of reality. It was a completely white room that I reappeared in, apart from certain bulges where I could see what I can only describe as the back bits of reality poking through into the room. I can't really fathom exactly what I mean by that now, but at the time it made perfect sense. This is something that regular Salvia users often talk about, a sense of the familiar at the time of the visions, a sense of all-knowing whilst under the trance. Yet, once you return to reality, that understanding can often be taken away from you. So at this point I wandered around this large white room, and I could hear something along the lines of elbows and toes, elbows and toes, elbows and toes, being chanted over and over again in the background. This is another thing that regular Salvia users often talk about whilst under the herb's effects, the Salvia Chant. The voices I heard this time were a lot more formal than the ones I'd heard before in my previous 3 experiences, although they were still very much non-threatening. The voices were also noticeably lower than the higher pitched chants I'd heard before. Definitely felt like a man's voice this time. Whilst in this room, that I coin as the behind the scenes section of reality, I continued to be pulled further and further back into this ever developing vision, and I began to twist round and round as I suddenly became aware of a machine clamping the very fabric of reality onto a ball that was our world. It was creating these realities in a folding, swirling motion, and at the end of each process it would clamp the section of reality firmly down onto the ball. However mind-expanding and moving this vision was, I remember at this point panicking and thinking, oh my god, what if I can't get out of this place? Just as I thought that, the voices that were chanting in the background suddenly changed, and they started chanting, "You're being put on, you're being put on, you're being put on," as if to say I was being put onto the machine in preparation to slot me back into reality. So at this point I reached out to where the machine was slotting reality onto this ball, and as I reached out it grabbed onto me and slotted me back in. At this point I began to refocus, and I slowly started to recognise bits of my room again. But as I looked around, it looked like it was still being reconstructed in front of my very eyes, and bits of my room still weren't visible. The machine then continued to do its work as it rolled and slotted the rest of my room back into place, and I slowly staggered up from the bed to try and regain my bearings. I feel like everything I saw whilst I was in this white room made perfect sense to me while I was there. It was as if for that split moment I was God. I don't mean Jesus or Allah, I just mean the united one that we all really are. It felt as if for those 2 short minutes the person that is Rhys Jones was momentarily planted into the eyes of God. For that moment I was both God and Rhys Jones at the same time. Now I've returned into the body of Rhys Jones, I'm struggling to comprehend exactly what I saw, but I like to think I've evaluated it the best I can whilst in this form. And there we go. It was a truly mind-boggling experience, and I hope to have more like it in the near future.